Hey everybody, it's Tyler Brinks. Welcome to the webinar Advanced Drop Shot Fishing. We're gonna go ahead and get started. I did one of these webinars on similar topic last year. I'm gonna dig in a little bit deeper and answer all of your questions. This will be recorded, so if you have any questions, you could send them over at any time. I'll also give you my contact information for the end. At the end, if you have any follow-up questions, email or Facebook, however you want to get a hold of me. A little bit about myself. I am a tournament angler. I'm a writer. I'm a sales rep. I do a lot in the fishing industry, and I love fishing. So I'm going to share a little bit about drop shot fishing. It's one of my favorite ways to fish. I've actually done this since 1999 is when I started drop shot fishing. So I have a lot of experience with it. It's one of my favorite techniques, and it's a great way to catch a lot of fish and a great way to catch big fish. So we'll go and get started with a quick presentation. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick poll though, just to kind of see where you guys are at with your level of drop shotting, how much you like it, and everything else. Okay, interesting. Good, kind of a good mix here. I'll kind of adjust the presentation accordingly, but it looks like a lot of experience. So we're going to go ahead and share the results real quick. So as you can see, a lot of people do it all the time. A lot of people once in a while, some people never. So like I said, it's kind of a good mix, only when I have to. Good. Yeah, well, it's a good technique. All right. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the agenda. I'm going to go over some common myths with drop shotting. Gear selection, because having the right gear is very important. Also some seasonal approaches, locations, where you're going to do this. If you're going to be vertical, dropping it straight down, or casting, retrieves and hook sets, and then, like I said, Q&A. But feel free to send questions anytime. But if we have time at the end, we'll answer all the ones that I haven't. And if not, you could send me an email, and I'll make sure to get to them. Okay, I'll start over just in case it cut out. But a lot of people think that drop shot fishing is only for small fish. And really it's a technique that works for all fish. You're going to catch small fish, but you're going to catch a lot of big fish as well. It's just a great way to put fish in the boat, period. Other people think it's Western or only for northern waters. And they work. Those are perfect waters for it, but really it works everywhere. I mean, I could think back when I was living in Florida and the places that I got to check drop shotting. Lakes like Lake Okeechobee, Harris Chain, Lake Seminole, Pickwick Lake in Alabama. I mean, those lakes are not generally known for finesse techniques at all, but drop shot does work. And I was able to get checks from drop shotting when things got tough. Another thing, I mean, people think it's only for clear water, but it can be in really all different types of water clarity. And one thing I really opened my eyes recently is I was using an underwater camera and the water was really muddy on top. But when you got down to the bottom, it was so clear and you could see perfectly. So just because it's dirty on top, it might be perfectly clear down at the bottom. It's something that I never realized, but it was crazy. Just, you go down 15 feet and it's still muddy and stained, but then maybe the bottom 10, it was perfectly clear. In truly muddy water, you're going to have to change your approach. You're going to have to, use different colors and things like that, darker colors, but it does work in just about any conditions. Another myth, deep water only. It works fine pitching to docks and, pitching to lily pads and logs and 2 feet of water. It's also a great bed fishing technique. So it doesn't have to be all the way out in, 50 feet of water. I mean, it works great out there, but it'll work just about anywhere. Same with, it's only for pressured bass. I mean, it works great for that. But if a fish is going to bite and they're really aggressive, you're still going to catch a lot on drop shot. A lot of people only use it in the summer, but it is an all around technique all year long. And some people kind of make fun of it, all the finesse fishing, they look down on it. But if you're in a tournament situation, it doesn't matter how you catch them, you just need to catch them. Or if you're just out for fun and it's a tough day and a drop shot saves the day and you catch something versus not catching something, that's how I look at it, at least. All right. Okay, so we're going to kind of jump into some of the equipment. One of the things, with a rod, something that's important and things that I look for in a drop shot rod, is either a spinning or a bait casting rod. I'm 99% of the time going to use a spinning rod. Once in a while I'll use a heavy drop shot on a bait cast setup, but typically it's going to be spinning. And typically it's also a light line technique 99% of the time again. So spinning does work a lot better with light line. As far as length, I'm pretty much always a 7'2" rod, action, medium light, fast action, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then sensitivity is important because those really light bites, you want to be able to feel those. So definitely get the best rod that you can afford and make sure it has those components. That's typically what most people use for drop shotting, including myself. Now, when it comes to reels, the important thing is to have one with a good drag. Because again, like I said, it's a light line technique. So you want to have a very good drag for when you do hook one of those big fish, that you're not going to lose it because of the drag. Not too big. Some people like a really big reel. Some people like a really small reel. Me personally, kind of in between. If you're a Shimano person, it's going to be like a 2,500 size or even a 3,000 size. And then like a Abu Garcia, it's usually, they have theirs by 20, 30, 40, but the 20 and 30 are the two that I would choose. I also want a smooth retrieve and, again, get what you can afford. If you're going to drop shot a lot, you might want to invest in a better quality reel, but if you don't do it very much, just do it, just get whatever you can afford and something that's still going to have these components so you can do it successfully. These are two of my drop shot rods, and I actually have several drop shot rods because if the bite is really good and I'm fishing around a lot of rocks, I don't want to sit there and retie leaders, and I don't want to retie hooks. I'll have 3, 4 drop shot rods, maybe with different weights or different baits or things like that, but I'll have them all rigged up and ready to go. And I'll kind of explain what these two are. One of them is the Ultra MBX drop shot rod from Phoenix, and that has a Fluger Patriarch on it, and it's a size 30. I also like the Abu Garcia 2.0, the new one. It's awesome. It's way better than the original one. It's a 7-foot medium light, and then also an Abu Garcia Rebo MGX, which I love that reel as well, and that's a size 20. So that's two that I'm using right now, and I love these. They're both great for drop shot of all sizes. They will handle really light weights and also heavy weights, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Okay, another key component is the drop shot rod. And, one of the big questions that I get is, should I use fluorocarbon or braid? I use both. I use a braided line main line and a fluorocarbon leader. And I cannot stress this enough. I mean, the braid is the way to go, in my opinion, on spinning, especially with drop shot, because this is a technique where the line is going to spin a lot because of just the way it's rigged. That worm is just going to twist and twist, and that's going to twist your line. So with fluorocarbon, eventually, if you do it long enough, you're going to start getting loops. So the way to solve that is to have that braided line main line, something light like a 10 or 15 pound, even a 20 pound, and then with an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. That is my preferred setup, and I can't believe I ever fish with just straight fluorocarbon or monofilament. I mean, it's an awesome way to fish. Okay. Got a question, but we're going to get to that, Chuck. Okay. But yeah, if you have any questions, just feel free to send them over. If it's something that relates to this, I'll get it right now. If not, we'll get them all at the end. Another thing about braid that I love is you're going to be able to cast a lot farther, and it's going to be a lot more sensitive. So braid and fluorocarbon, I cannot stress that enough. It's awesome. And I'll show you the knots that I use. I'll show you the couple illustrations. There's two that work really well. Leader length, I like to have, and there's really, kind of backing up the two different types of leaders that I'm talking about. The leader from the braid to fluorocarbon, I'm going to be using a leader that will go all the way up through your rod and not get into your reel. So you want to reel it up at a casting, we're hanging like you're going to cast, and not have the knot go into your reel. That's how I do it. Some people put a 20 or 30 foot leader on there, but in my opinion, when you're casting and reeling it in, eventually that's gonna hurt the knot, and I don't like to do that. Now the other leader length that is related to drop shot is from your hook to your weight, and I'm actually going to get to that as well. One other benefit of having the braid and fluorocarbon leader is you're going to save a lot of money. Braid's a lot more expensive to begin with, but it lasts a lot longer. Even as much as I fish, one spool of braid will last the whole year. And what I do after maybe halfway through the year, I'll reel it backwards onto another reel, And what this does is, all that line that's at the bottom of your reel, it never sees the light of day. So you can just reel it back onto another reel. So you can really get a lot of time out of that braided line. Maybe, 30, $40 to begin with, but if it lasts all season and is still good, even maybe after that, it's definitely a good way to go. And you can get the best fluorocarbon you want if you're only using a little bit. One spool of what I use, Cigar Tatsu, is really expensive. If you're just going to use it, I mean, admittedly, it's like 40 or $50, but if that lasts you all season, just using 6-7 feet at a time, if you look at it that way, it's a lot better investment to have that quality. Now, with what pound tests, I always tell people to first compare the diameters, because there's such a huge difference between different brands. So just kind of look at what you're getting, and look at the actual diameter, not the pound test, because that's going to affect how you cast, the action of your bait, and everything else. So for me, I use a Cigar Smackdown, and it's actually a 20 pound, and I do that just because it's so thin. I mean, it has a 6 pound monofilament diameter, where other braids have 8 and 9 pound, as you see there. So if you're using a different brand, you might be using a 10 or a 15, but that light braid casts really good on spinning. Fluorocarbon, I usually use 8, but I will use 6 as well. And again, it comes down to the diameter. The Cigar Tatsu that I was talking about, it has a good diameter, that's much smaller than other 8 pound tests. So it's almost like you can use a heavier pound and still have the same. I mean, it is. I mean, you can use a heavier pound and still get that same diameter that you would if you're using another brand. So that's the ones that I use, and I have not had any problems at all with it. All right, so braid to fluoro knots, and this is a huge question, and it's a very important one, because your connection between the braid and fluorocarbon, it has to be strong. Obviously, you don't want it to break. You want it to be smooth going through your guides. So there's a couple different ones that you can use. I mean, the one that I used for years was the uni to uni, and I've actually recently switched, but I still think this is a very good knot. I haven't had any major issues with this knot. It's easy to tie. And it's also called the double uni, but you could see it there, and there's a lot of videos online. I'm not going to tie it because it's hard to see right here, but there's a lot of step-by-step instructions on how to tie this. So that's a good way to learn. Just go to YouTube, grab some old line, and just practice and practice and practice. Another one I use is the modified Albright Alberto. I mean, people call it all different kinds of things, and it's very similar. Okay. Oh yeah, Damon. He said uni to uni is the best knot. Why does my Palomar break above the knot so often? So I didn't say it's the best. Like I said, it's something I've used for forever and ever. But I recently switched to this knot for one reason, and it's the reason is that I never ever broke a fish off on the uni. But when you hang up and you pull it, it will usually break at the knot. Now with this knot, it doesn't happen. And I was at the Bassmaster Classic this year, and I was actually there with Cigar. And what I was doing is helping the pros and things like that. But the whole time, we had a different pro coming into the booth, and they just tied knots all day and showed people that were coming into the booth different knots. I asked every single one of them what knot they used, and most people used this knot. A lot of them still use uni to uni. Some other ones have like surgeon's knots and all these other, there's saltwater knots and things like that. But this is the one that people kept saying is great, and because it doesn't break at the knot. Again, like I said, the uni to uni is a serviceable knot. I never lost any fish to it that I know of, but it actually would break if I hung up really bad into a tree or something like that. So this is what I've switched to. So definitely same thing. Practice with this knot. It's pretty easy to do. I actually think it's easier than the double uni, which both of them can be tied in about 20 seconds if you got a lot of practice. And it's also really a clean knot. I mean, as you can see this illustration, it's really thin, so it goes through the guides a lot better, in my opinion. But I definitely have switched to this, and I love this knot. It's awesome. But again, uni is not. I'm not going to say it's the worst knot. I mean, it's a lot better than some other knots out there. Okay, another very important thing is the terminal tackle that you use. I mean, as you can see, this is one of my drop shot boxes, and it has all different types of weights, styles, different styles of hooks. And I use them all for different purposes, and I'll kind of explain the different shapes of drop shot weights, when to use them and why. And, we had a question a little bit earlier about if I drop shot um, lakes with vegetation, and yes, definitely. And I'll talk about it. But if there's vegetation, I'm going to be using the cylinder style weight, just because it doesn't hang up and act like an anchor like some of these round or this teardrop. Those are great weights for other situations, but in vegetation, definitely the cylinder is the way to go. You're not going to hang up as much on the grass, but you still will. All right, again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot them off. Okay. So, with drop shot weights, you really need to be prepared to lose them. I mean, don't get attached to your weight, because if you're fishing them right, you're going to lose tons of them. If you're fishing around the rocks and all the cover that the fish live in, you're going to go through piles of them. I mean, that box that I showed you, I usually stuff them in my pocket because I know that I'm going to be losing them. My little change pocket in my jeans is usually, full of drop shot weights, just because it's a lot handier to just grab them versus digging around in a tackle box. All the time when my wife does laundry, she finds drop shot weights, and they're just always in my pocket because you just want to be ready to get back out there. So another thing I started doing is pouring my own, and Do It Molds does offer the mold for all of these, the cylinder, the teardrop, and the round. And initially it's going to be a bigger investment. It's about $50 for a mold, maybe $100 for the equipment, and then you got to actually do it. But over the long term, it beats paying $5 for 10 weights or whatever they cost. I mean, it's definitely the way to go. You can get a pack of swivels on eBay. You can buy like 500 for $20. So you can definitely save some money. So I definitely recommend that if you haven't done that. It's easy to do, and it's going to save a lot of money. I have piles of them just ready for the season, ready to lose. Okay, as far as lead versus tungsten, typically I'm going to use lead just because it costs money to use tungsten. It's a lot more expensive, but there are situations when tungsten definitely does make a difference. When you could feel bites better, when you can get a really big weight in a smaller profile. So typically I'll use the big size for tungsten just so I don't have a huge hunk of lead. I mean, I still do that, but tungsten is a preferred way to have a smaller just a smaller thing hanging off of your rod, really. And it, like in a tournament situation, I will use tungsten as well if I'm really dialed in and it's a really a tough bite. I will use these weights right here. These are the Eco Pro Tungsten full contact drop shot weights, and they're great. I mean, I can't say anything bad about them, but again, they do cost a lot more than pouring your own or even buying some lead weights. Okay, so as far as sizes, there's all kinds. I mean, I have a mold for 1.5 ounces, I believe it is, or an ounce. I mean, it's huge, and I do use that actually, believe it or not. But an 1/8 ounce is typically when I'm less than about 10 feet of water. A 3/16 or a quarter is my most common. 3/16 is my favorite, and I'll use that anywhere up to 30 feet deep or down to 30 feet deep, however you want to look at it. Quarter to 3/16, you might think it's pretty much the same. It's really close, but I do like to get away with the lightest that I can. So I'll go with a 3/16 because it's light enough that it's not gonna have a huge impact on the bottom. It's not gonna make too much of a noise. It's gonna be heavy enough to get down to 30 feet. The 3/8 is another one that I use quite a bit, and that's usually like the 30 to 50 foot range. And then the bigger sizes, like those 3/4 and an ounce, or anything above 3/8 up to an ounce, I will use that when I'm fishing deep and I'm looking at fish on the screen. And it's not like you have to have that, because if it's 30 feet down, a 3/8 will get down there quickly. But when you're watching the fish on the screen, having that big giant weight will get down there much quicker. If you think about it, your boat's floating there and the fish is down here and you drop it, you're going to get down what you're seeing on the screen much quicker. Where if it's a little windy or a little anything, or if you're moving on the trolling motor, by the time that weight falls and pendulums down, you're going to be far away from what you saw on the screen. So I like that huge weight just to get right down to what I'm seeing on the graph, right into my view. You can watch the weight fall down, you can watch the fish react to it, but having that bigger weight just gets it down there a lot quicker, and I like it. And I still use that same rod, those little light medium light rods, and it's not actually rated for that. So some people think I'm crazy, but you're not casting it, so you're not going to damage the rod at all. You're not going to fling it out there. When you're video game fishing, as I call it, you just drop it straight down, and you could use any rod. You can use an ultralight rod. It's just like reeling in a 1-ounce fish. It's the same thing. It's not going to break the rod or anything. So definitely try that out if you're looking at things on the graph. Use that bigger weight. It's just going to get down there a lot quicker, and you can see it so much better, right into your view, and you're not waiting for it to fall down. This is a picture of me. This is the Niagara River last year, and you can see this giant weight that these guides were using. And the reason we were using these weights is this is massive current coming in, and it was about 30 feet deep, but we needed these giant weights that were about an ounce, or otherwise your bait was going to be all the way down, way out of your way. So that's another use for these giant weights, is if it is a lot of current too. And again, this is the same type of rod. It's a medium or medium light. This wasn't my rod. This was the guide's rod, but that was something that reinforced what I was already doing for video game fishing. If you're fishing fast current, these weights work great. Okay, we're going to stop here for a second, answer a couple questions, and then we'll, again, just go ahead and shoot them off as you get them. So Damon asked, wide gap hook, is that okay, or does it kill the action? I was thinking about a 1/0 wide gap weedless rig may be better for weeds. And I'm going to talk about the hooks next. And I do use a Texas rig for drop shot quite a bit. So I'll talk about that one in a second, Damon. The other one said, at what point is video game fishing too shallow? I would say it kind of depends on the water clarity, but if you can actually see the bottom, it's too shallow, because you're going to see better with your own eyes than the graph. If it's a little bit off colored, I'd say about 10 feet. I've done it, and at some point you're going to be too close to the fish where they're going to not be right under the boat. So ideally, I'm going to say it's 20 plus feet is probably prime. I'd say most of the time I'm doing that is either early spring or late fall, and I'm going to be using I'm going to be in about 30 to 50 feet, I would say. Okay, another question from Patrick. What are your thoughts on these new spin shot drop shot hooks? And I do not like them at all. I mean, it's a cool design. If you guys aren't familiar with it, there's actually a swivel, a hook, and then a line tie under it. I think it's just too much hardware personally, and it's added more work to add that leader as well. I've never had any problems with the other ones. And if you're using that braid to fluorocarbon, you're not going to get that line twist that these are really designed to prevent. Some guys love them, but I don't like them. Ken says, do you ever insert glass rattles in your plastic? I really don't. I mean, once in a while, if I'm pitching or flipping, I would do it, but not really for drop shot. Calvin, good question on leader length. Should you adjust it based on the depth with the current? I would say definitely. Yeah, do that for sure. I mean, if it's fast current and that the fish aren't right on the bottom, you might want a longer leader. But leader length is a tricky thing. I mean, it's something that always changes based on your depth. Typically a 12 to 16 inch leader is going to get you through most situations. If you're super shallow, you want that maybe a 4-inch or 6-inch. But if you're super deep, you might want, I don't know, 18 inches or even more. Okay, John, after fall turnover, what would it be for me at my home lake? So, that time of year is pretty tough a lot of times. That transition between fall and winter can be difficult, but a drop shot is an excellent technique for that time of year when the fish aren't as active. So I think that's a great time to drop shot. All right, some good questions, guys. But yeah, feel free to send them on over. We're gonna go back here real quick. Close that. Okay. So I kind of talked about the shapes of drop shot weights, and I'll kind of give you a rundown of where I use them and why. The round, these have a great surface area because they're so big and round. So what that is going to do is they're going to be very sensitive. So if I'm fishing around rock, it's a good place to use it. Sand is another great place to use these round ones as well. It's not my favorite, but they definitely have a place. My favorite is actually probably the teardrop here, which is right in the where's my mouse? There you go. one next to it. So the teardrop is a good in between. You know, like I was saying earlier, that cylinder weight is not, or as that is your best bet for weeds. You know, this is kind of in between. That teardrop, it still has that bigger surface area on the bottom, so it's going to be more sensitive, but it's not going to hang up as much as that round one. The other one's a teardrop as well. Cylinder, you know, it's a great all-around size. It does get into rocks a little bit. I think, I mean, if there are a lot of small rocks, it will hang up. But again, you got to be used to losing those weights. When I'm fishing really deep, sometimes I'll just tie on one of these bass casting sinkers. You know, they use them for catfish and all kinds of stuff. You know, there's no reason that you have to have a swivel on the top of them. It helps definitely. But you know, if you can't find a 1 ounce drop shot weight, just buy one of these. They're a lot cheaper too, and you just tie them on there. One thing I will mention on this, you know, these little clips on the top, you know, they're designed so that when you hang up, you pull them off. You slide the weight through, or the line through the clip, and pull it up, and it just pinches it there. So that the design is when you pull back, you're just going to lose your weight and not the whole rig. But I actually do tie an overhand knot on there, just one, you know, because it will still break off if it's really hung up, but a lot of times it will pull back. So just a simple overhand knot and pull it tight, and that will help get some of those weights back. And it will still break off, like I said, if it's super, you know, super snagged, it's not going to get messed up. All right, we're going to jump into the baits, and this is probably the question that everyone asks. You know, they think there's a magic formula for drop shot weights or drop shot baits, but I think you can use anything for a drop shot, just about. And I'll tell you what, one thing I do not like for drop shots in a second. But you know, by far my favorite is a Roboworm straight tail. You know, 4.5 inch or 6 inch. I use those all the time. I also really like their Alive Shad and their Sculpin. And typically, when I would use those compared to the straight tail is when the bait fish are smaller, or the fishing is tougher, or it's really cold. I like those Alive Shads quite a bit. There's some couple other baits, and I'll show you pictures of these if you guys aren't familiar with them. I have a few pictures I'm going to go through that cover most of these baits. You know, Biovex Coltfish and Shad Tail and the stick, I'll show you those. The Berkeley Power Bait Twitch Tail Minnow is an awesome bait. It's kind of like that Alive Shad. It's just a small minnow profile, like a 3-incher. The Kitech Sexy Impact and Easy Shiner, love those two. Shad shaped worms, and even flukes. You know, you could catch some big fish on a standard size fluke on a drop shot. I've done it many times, and it's one of my favorite ways to catch them, especially in the fall. They really seem to key on those bigger bait fish, so that's a good way to catch big fish as well. So as far as the size and the shape, you know, I kind of alluded to that when I was talking about the smaller profile when it's cold, or when the fish are less aggressive, or the bait fish are small. So it's really going to kind of depend on that. You know, when and where. You know, going back to what I said, there's no magic. You know, it's just kind of knowing, just finding what they're going to bite. So, you know, switching out constantly. You know, having a few baits that you're really confident in. You know, some good colors that you like, and you know, switching them out. That's the thing that I could, the best advice is to, you know, not be afraid to switch constantly. Maybe have a few baits up on your front deck and just switch back and forth until you find what the fish want that day. With colors, you know, you want to just match the hatch. I mean, it's like what the fly fishermen say. And, you know, if there's a lot of perch, you want something that looks like that. You know, if there's some shad, you're going to want a lighter white color. I mean, that's how I always approach it. And you can't go wrong with a natural color. You know, anything green pumpkin is going to work, you know, but, you know, I'll talk about something in a second, how bright colors sometimes are the way to go. So I'll show you a couple of those as well. Typically, general rule of thumb, lower water temperature, less action. So you don't want something that's crazy action when there's a lot of water, you know, when it's really cold. And I say no to curls. I mean, those curly tail worms will really twist your line. You know, one bait I didn't mention is actually the Yamamoto cut tail. And you can actually make something similar to that with any curl tail worm by just cutting the tail in half. And if you guys aren't familiar with that, just look it up. It's a Yamamoto cut tail, works great. But it just looks like a curl tail worm that the tail has been cut. So it's a cool little bait. All right, got a couple more questions here. I like this. When can't you drop shot? I don't think there's a time when you can't, really, honestly. I mean, the way I throw it, like I said, I skip it under docks, I pitch to lily pads. I mean, I don't think there's a time when it won't work, honestly. The other one is I tie a stainless steel wire through the hook eye. Um, oh, is it, Michael, that to keep your bait in place? You just put a little piece of wire through the hook eye. You know, there's a product by Eco Pro Tungsten. It's called the Diamond Peg, and it's a similar concept. It's like a little clip that just slides through the tip of or right through your eye, and it keeps that plastic pegged. You know, I don't see why it wouldn't work. You know, that's a good idea there, Michael. Are you going to go over dialing in a Lowrance 2D Lowrance screen? You know, I'm not today, John, just because I have we have a lot of other stuff to cover. But there's a webinar that was just done by someone else with Navionics recently, and it goes over some of those settings. You know, and all these webinars, as well as other people's webinars, is on the Navionics YouTube page. So definitely check that out. There's tons and tons of them on there. Ever try a French fry on the drop shot? Damon says, well, you know, there's a bait that I use that's very similar to that. You know, it's just it's called the Colt stick. And also, like I said, I'm going to show you some pictures, and it looks like a French fry. And that's a great one to wacky rig. Rodney, Senkos are great drop shot baits. I agree. I do use them. I prefer the thinner ones, the Pro, I believe it's called. You know, it's just a thinner design. I like those more for a drop shot. But yeah, a Senko will work great. Oh, Alex, good question. Is drop shotting effective for other species besides bass? Oh yeah, definitely. I've caught so many different random fish on drop shotting when I'm trying to catch bass. You know, I've caught northern pike, I've caught tiger muskie, I've caught catfish, bluegill, crappie, walleye, trout. I mean, I've caught tons of stuff on drop shot. There's probably more that, excuse me, that I can't even think of. But you know, one thing that I've been doing this winter is walleye fishing, and I went out one day and just slayed the walleye on drop shot fishing. I mean, the limit here on one of the lakes that we fish is 16 per person, and we both had limits, and it was 11 o'clock in the morning, so we went home. You know, and that was drop shot fishing, looking at them on the screen, just like I was bass fishing, and it was the same exact baits, same rod, same reel, same everything. So yeah, definitely it's effective for other species. I mean, I catch trout on it all the time. It's annoying for when I'm in bass tournament. I mean, they're fun to catch, but yeah, it's definitely effective. Okay, going back to color or to the baits. You know, the color selection is a huge question for people, but like I said, it really people make it really complicated. You know, if it's somewhat what they're going to be eating, if it's natural, or if it, you know, even if it's not. I mean, people make it little more complicated than I think as far as color selection. So I use all different types of colors, and really it's just going to depend on the water clarity. I want the fish to be able to see it, usually natural. And then a lot of times those smallmouth really like those bright colors, you know, like those pinks, those chartreuse and white. You know, they, for some reason, they're wired differently. They love those crazy colors. All right, so here's a quick rundown of some of the baits. You know, this is a Robo Worm, Aaron's Magic, probably my #1 favorite drop shot bait. The Kitech Sexy Impact. This is a cool bait because it has it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but it's a really thin section right here, and then this tail, and it kind of quivers on a drop shot. It looks really cool, and it looks like a fish swimming. This is that Robo Worm Sculpin, again in Aaron's Magic. This is a shad-shaped worm type. It's a copy of one. It's a hand pour, but it's a good shape and good profile. And Damon, this is that Colt stick that I was talking about. It kind of looks like a French fry. This is a great bait to wacky rig too. You can do that with drop shot baits. You can wacky rig them or anything else. Let me jump to the next one real quick. Okay, cool. I will be talking about that here in a second. Another Robo Worm. This is the Berkeley Havoc Moneymaker. This is a great one to rig right in the center, wacky rig. There's that Kitech again. There is the Berkeley Twitch Tail Minnow, and then this is what they call the Easy Shiner, and this is a cool little bait. You know, it's a little tiny swim bait, but it looks really good on a drop shot. And this is from Kitech. So there's one I caught on this bright chartreuse color. I slayed them this day on just this bait. I mean, it's for some reason they liked that chartreuse that day. It really bit them good. This is a different picture of those those Biovex baits. That was that chartreuse one I just showed you. This is what's called their Colt shad tail, and then this is a Colt fishtail. And I like these Biovex baits because they have little holes in them, and it's like air bubbles, so they float really well on a drop shot. And they have a 3-inch size and a 4-inch size. Actually, this is the bait that I was catching the walleye on, but it was a different kind of chartreuse. It was called the AU, but it doesn't look like a lot of the AU colors like from a roboworm. It's more of a brighter color, but that was a great bait for walleye in the 3-inch size. Okay, another big question is how to rig it. You can nose hook it. That's what most people do. Small octopus hook or a special split shot, drop shot hook or anything like that. Just hook it right in the nose. I mean, that's what most people do. But I actually do Texas rig it quite a bit. Damon, you asked this question earlier. It's a way to not hang up as much or not get as much grass on your hook. So a Texas rig, my favorite hook, I'll show you in a minute, is a Gamakatsu G-Lock. It's kind of like an extra wide gap, but it's a little bit different. I'll show it to you. And then also Wacky Rig. That's a great way to catch pressured fish. Again, match the bait and the hook for the bait and the cover. I'll show you some styles and sizes. So these are some of my actual drop shot hooks here. This is the Gamakatsu Aaron Martin's, I think it's called like a TWG or something like that, but it has a different type of coating on it. It's like a titanium wire, but it has this coating on it, and it does seem to be stronger. That's what they claim. Half the time, what the companies say is just marketing stuff, but they actually do seem to not bend out as much, and I really like those hooks. This is the standard split shot, drop shot hook right under it. The other one down here is it's called the Owner Mosquito. Sorry about that. I forgot what it's called. But yeah, I like that. It has kind of a different bend. It kind of points out a little bit, but it does hook the fish very good. This is that G-Lock I was talking about. My favorite size is a size 1, but I will use a size 1/0 for a little bit bigger baits. But this is what I'm going to use if I'm in a Texas rig. For the most part, it keeps that bait nice and compact in there. This is the rebarb, and it has a little barb on it, which is kind of hard to see there, but that keeps your bait in place. And this is something that you can get with a Gamakatsu hook. That straight shank is good for those bigger baits as well. And you Texas rig it, so it's not going to get hung up as much. Okay, so I had a question earlier, and this is what I'm going to base my my location tips on. And he said he lives in Phoenix. Can you look at Saguaro Lake? I've never been there, but I'm going to show you a couple images from there, but also what I look for anywhere I go in the different seasons. So post-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn. And a lot of these these are going to apply to any fishing during the season. So they're kind of general, but like I was saying earlier, there's really no wrong place to drop shot. But this is just where the fish are going to be. So pre-spawn, obviously transition areas, they're going to try to get spawning, spawning in the shallow flats, logs, laydowns, docks, deeper water, grass lines, and docks after they spawn. So these kind of all go hand in hand. So this is Saguaro Lake. So as you can see, this lighter blue up near the top right here, these, like I said, I've never been there, but I would guess that fish are going to spawn up here because it's shallower. There's some underwater points. So, pre-spawn, spawn, post-spawn, it should all be in that general area. Summer, I'm going to be looking for current if possible. That's always a good place to fish during the summer just because it's going to be cooler water. Then offshore, humps, points, deep water, but they'll still be shallow in the morning a lot of times to feed. So those grass lines, anything shallow where there's going to be bait fish is a good place during the summer. And if you are staying shallow, docks. And docks are an awesome place to drop shot. Pitch it up next to a laydown or a post, I should say, and just shake it right there. Because oftentimes they'll see it falling down, they'll go out and check it out, you'll start shaking it, and they'll bite it. So that's a great thing to look for is docks, and also if they have shade on them as well, which they should on one side. So, going back to this Saguaro Lake, I would say that this would be a good area. Let's see where my mouse is. Keep losing it. So I would say, some of these deeper underwater points are going to be good. There's some flooded timber over there. I think Saguaro Lake probably doesn't have many docks. I've been to a couple lakes in Arizona, and a lot of them don't have many docks or no docks. So, this would be a good area here. You could see these deep, the contour lines are really close together. So this is a very deep area. you know, shallow point. You can see that blue, so it's a little bit lighter water. So that's a good tip there for you. Fall, you know, what I'm gonna look for is those deep points, steep, rocky banks, underwater points, deep water with shallow water nearby. And then another key is finding bait fish on your graph. If you can find that, there's gonna most likely gonna be bass around. Okay, so fall, you know, like I was saying, some of these deeper, there's a creek, there's probably bait fish in there. Some of these um, points with deep water close by. I mean, again, those are just some general things. I took a look at this real quick, you know, but with the Navionics web app, that's where these came from. You can do this for free. Just go to navionics.com, and then you pull out this web app tab, and it'll pull up your maps, and you can check out anything, any lake that you fish that's covered. You can do that for free. I use that all the time. Just make sure to touch this button over here in the corner. This enables the sonar chart, and this is going to get you the highest level of detail. So go ahead and just push that button on there, and it's going to be much better detail. Okay. Winter, you know, it's going to kind of depend on where you live. You know, where I live, winter is going to be like ice, or it's going to be really cold, or the bass aren't going to bite as much, but it's still possible to catch them just about any time of year if you're fishing deep water, you know, humps, those deep areas, rocky points. So, you know, some of these like underwater points out here, you could see them forming right there. That's where I would look if I was on this lake right here. You know, you could see this is one of the deepest areas I found. I mean, there's about almost 100 foot there. You know, so I could tell this is a really deep area, but that looks like a good wintering area to me. Okay, you know, another question is, you know, should I cast the drop shot or should I just drop it straight down? And generally I do both, just depending on how deep I am. You know, if it's over 25 feet, I'm going to be dropping it straight down, looking at my graph, and hopefully seeing those fish and dropping it straight down there. You know, if it's under 25 feet, I'm typically going to cast out and then retrieve it back towards me, just like I would with a jig or any other technique. And like I said, I really find myself watching a graph, video game fishing, you know, that 20, 25, 30, and deeper. And that's a fun way to fish. If you guys haven't done it, it's addicting to do it and just see those fish and just drop it right on them. And you can almost tell when you're going to get a bite. You know, sometimes you see them moving towards it and you just anticipate that bite. It's really fun. And you don't have to have like, you know, really expensive electronics. You know, if your electronics are dialed in, you should be able to at least see your bait and see the fish and know that you're in the right area at least. Okay, so we're gonna just talk about a couple of retrieves real quick. And you know, I fish a drop shot really fast, and you know, I call it fast finesse. I mean, I just kind of did that because I noticed when I started filming myself with GoPros that I shake that thing constantly. Like I never realized it before, but I'm always moving that bait for the most part. You know, and that's something that I think gets a lot of action in your worm. And it's a great way to catch fish with a drop shot. You don't have to fish really slow, and you could still cover a lot of water. You know, you're not going to be as fast as, you know, throwing a crankbait or, you know, spinnerbait moving really fast down the bank, but you can cover a lot of water. You don't have to sit in the same spot all day. Like I said a couple times, I like to pitch this up to docks and shallow cover, just like I would with a jig. You know, it's the same thing. I found it to be pretty easy because you can just hold the weight under your bait and just kind of sling it out there. And it's just takes a little bit of practice, but you can put that in very tight places, just like you would with a bait cast rod and a jig or anything else. And if you have, you know, braid and fluorocarbon and it's really thick cover, you might not bring all the fish in, they might get you wrapped up, but you're still going to get more fish than if you never pitch there. That's how I look at things like this. You know, if you're pitching in there and you lose it, you know, that's fine, you know, but if you never pitch in there, you're never going to even have a chance to land it. And I found that a lot of times those fish will head straight out to deep water and it's fine at that point. You know, I also do a couple other things as well, you know, just kind of hopping it along the bottom and then pausing it. You know, that's a great way to get a bite drop shot fishing. Also swimming a drop shot, you know, just like you would with, say, like if you guys fish swim jigs at all, you know, a lot of times you want to just hit the top of cover, you know, just kind of look at it like that, you know, just swimming it and just hitting every once in a while. You want to feel that weight hit the bottom and just swimming it along. That's a great technique, you know, especially for smallmouth. especially in rivers. That's a great way to catch them. And then if it's tough, or you see one on your screen, just constantly shaking it in one place, not reeling it, just shaking it. And that's another way to catch fish that are, like I said, are a little bit less aggressive. So those are some of the different techniques. But again, just experiment with different ones. Like everything else, there's really not a wrong way to do it. You just want to know what the fish are going to be wanting that day. Okay, this is another one that I see, people that fish with me as non-boaters, or when I was a non-boater fishing with boaters, that just wail on fish when they get a bite on drop shot fishing, and they lose the fish or they snap their line, and they're just blaming the line and all this stuff. But it's just because they set the hook too hard. Really all you have to do is just do what's called a reel set. So you just kind of start reeling and just moving your rod a little bit. You're just reeling and pulling. You're not setting the hook. And those small sharp hooks will do the work. They will hook into fish, and you're going to hook them good too. Just lift up and start reeling, and just kind of do it both at the same time. Just swing over, because you're not going to break your line or rip out those hooks. And don't go wailing on it like it's a jig biting the pads, or you're punching or something like that. So that's the best advice I can give you for that. And if you're doing that already, then you're doing it right, in my opinion. All right, so we got through them all. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them over real quick. We've got about 5 minutes, and we have another webinar right after this, so I don't want to hold them up too long. So my next webinars, though, is fishing for swim baits for smallmouth, which is something I love doing. I had a day last fall that was just epic. I caught a 6.5-pound smallmouth, a couple 5s. I had about a 26-pound bag of smallmouth, all on swim baits. And I'll tell you about that, what I was using, how I was doing it, everything else. But it's a great, fun way to catch big smallmouth. Also, we're going to do a webinar on June 15th on post-spawn bass tricks. A lot of people hate fishing in the post-spawn. They say the post-spawn funk and all this stuff, but I actually like it because they're predictable. A lot of times they're schooled up, so I actually like that time of year because all the other guys are complaining, and you got an edge on them. Then we're going to do one regionally focused to where I live. July 20th, summer bass fishing in the Pacific Northwest. We'll go over different lakes, how I approach them, and places that work. And if you guys live in the north, or if you live in the Midwest, a lot of the lakes that we fish out here are very similar to those lakes. There are a lot of natural lakes with pads and things like that, and then a lot of more smallmouth type places. So there will be some information in there that would apply to you as well. Again, like I said, if you have any follow-up questions, if you have questions now, feel free to shoot them off. But you could send them to my email, tbrinks@navionics. You can find me on any of the social media stuff. So definitely don't be afraid to ask. I'll answer all your questions. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Oh yeah, tons of questions. Okay, do you use cut bait, smallie beavers cut in half to give a bait fish profile? There's a bait that's almost exactly like that. It's a yum. It's either the kill shot or the warning shot. But look at that bait, because it's basically a smallie beaver cut in half. And I used to do that, but now I just get these because I think they're just a better built bait than cutting your own. But if you have sweet beavers, cut them in half. But yeah, definitely check out that yum bait. It's a cool bait. Damon said, how does the BioVex plastic hold up? I haven't had any problems at all with that. That day I was walleye fishing. I caught probably 12 walleye on the same bait. So, they have teeth. So I'd say very good. Floating plastic. Okay. Kicker Fish products. I've never seen their floating plastics, but I will check them out. Okay. Let's see if we got any more. All right. Do you use Senkos? And Chuck, I did talk about this a little bit earlier. I like the Senko, the Pro style, or whatever it's called, the thin one. I like those for drop shotting, but you could use a regular Senko. That'd be fine. We had another question. The guy had said that he really likes the 3-inch size, and I would agree. That'd probably be a cool drop shot bait. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and end here, but this will be recorded, and it will be on YouTube in the next week or so as soon as they upload it. But again, if you have any questions, just feel free to send them off my way, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks, guys.